Anne Hathaway plays Gloria, an alcoholic who discovers she puppets a kaiju wreaking havoc on the other side of the world. The premise is certainly quirky, and it does go to some darker places that you might not initially expect. So let's dive in and discuss Colossal. Welcome everyone to the Atomic Cinema Experiment. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
I come in peace.
This is a science fiction movie podcast. We get together and talk about a movie we watched that's that simple, and today we are tackling a vote winner. Our patrons voted between three 2010s movies, and the winner was 2016's Colossal. So that is what we'll be talking about today. We'll start spoiler free as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we get to the spoilers, and if you're enjoying the show on YouTube, hit the like button, helps out a bunch if you do, and you can support the show, help keep it coming, and get some bonuses over at Patreon, but I'll tell you more about that at the end of the episode. So this one's got a pretty unique premise, and that is that Gloria, played by Anne Hathaway, is an alcoholic who discovers that if she happens to go to one particular location in her hometown, a kaiju will appear in Korea, and it will mimic her movements. I.e., she is the kaiju, she's just unaware that she has been a kaiju on the other side of the planet.
You know, I hate that Hollywood just keeps recycling the same, like, three plots over and over again.
Hey, you know, that's the thing. It's a unique plot. It's a unique premise. Yeah. I'll have to give it that. So, before we get into anything else, that's what we would say. But, yeah, I had seen this maybe a year or two after it came out, something in there, you know. So it's been a while because, you know, it's 10 years old now. But I definitely saw it somewhere around that time. Had you seen this before, David?
No, I have not seen it before. I was aware of it coming out and I was interested in seeing it, but I hadn't. However, I did say at the end of last week's episode that I had seen clips of this just presented to me via like YouTube shorts and stuff. And unfortunately, one of those clips was like the final reveal of the movie. Oh. So yeah, I went into this kind of like, I think I know where we're headed with this one.
Yeah, well, not much you can do about it now, but
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it has a unique premise, and it's definitely, I think it's a deceptive movie. I think most people going into it, only just knowing the basic premise, probably aren't expecting it to go exactly where it goes.
Yeah, I think going into it, my initial thoughts was it's going to be something akin to like Pacific Rim. Like it's like obviously not an exact 1-to-1, but it's going to have some of that, like, you know, kaiju action, but then also taking this more humanistic tone to it, and like knowing that they can control these essentially mechs, but just in a different term.
I believe, I don't know who said this. But either it was sold to the audience or it was sold to an executive or someone. Someone heard the pitch as it's. Actually, I don't even know if it was it Godzilla or was it Pacific Rim? I don't know. But a kaiju movie meets Lost in Translation was the pitch that someone made at some point. I don't know if that tracks exactly, but I kind of see why they wanted to shock someone with the meets line. Like, it's this meets this, and it's like, wait, how? What? How in the hell? Why? How does that possibly go together?
I mean, based off of what you're saying there, I would imagine it's the kaiju that are moving through Japan and falling in love / finding companionship with each other, but you know, whatever.
Yeah, it's not an accurate comparison, but it's, you know, it's an amusing one to say. But yeah, so no, I mean, honestly, the movie I would compare this most to, at least to an extent, and I won't say why for spoilers, not just for this movie, but for the other movie that I'm comparing it to. But there's a movie that came out a few years after this that we did on streams called The Wolf of Snow Hollow, and I definitely felt some parallels with that, based on how it tackles at least one similar subject and how the werewolf in that movie represents something. There was definitely a little bit of that here, and this came first. Also worth mentioning, the director of this had directed a fantastic movie in Spain about 10 years prior called Time Crimes. I don't know if you've done that one as a homework movie yet.
I have not. Nope.
No, okay, well, that's because I recognize the name Nacho. I'm like, Nacho. I've definitely seen a Nacho before as a director.
Yeah.
Oh, sure enough, it was Time Crimes. So I was like, oh, that's pretty neat. He's doing bigger stuff with Hollywood stars and whatnot. So, yeah. So we got Anne Hathaway in the lead role. We got Jason Sudeikis in this basically the co-lead role, to be honest. And then in supporting roles, you got Tim Blake Nelson, you got Dan Stevens popping in for a little bit as well. And those are the ones that are mainly there. The only other main cast member is Austin Stowell, who I don't really think I know from anything, but since
he's got one of those faces though, like he seems so familiar, but I feel like it's specifically from like being the hunky guy in some like chick flick movie. I don't feel like it's anything outside of that.
He was in Whiplash, apparently. I don't remember him in Whiplash, but I'll believe it. There was lots of college students in that movie.
No, he was the guy who was originally the drummer.
Was he?
Yeah, I recognize him now. Yeah, he's got that face to it. He was the not the one that was like originally in the good band, but he was the one who was brought on in order to mess with Miles a little bit.
Right. Also, he was in Fantasy Island, the 2020 movie, which I
remember deeply. I remember so much of.
Oh, I've happily forgotten every detail that I possibly can of that movie. But that's pretty much all I recognize in this list from him. So, anyway, without further ado, David, what did you think of Colossal?
So you were hinting at it, and I'm not going to spoil too much of it, but this is a movie that is very heavily laden with overarching themes and like reading into it at a slightly different depth. It's honestly more of a character story than it is like a spectacle story. I think that all of that stuff actually plays out pretty well. I found myself getting more and more engrossed with it as the movie progressed, where I really got into how these characters interact and the way that they're managing the situation that they're being put in, and it got me there. The flip side of that is viewing it through the sci-fi lens, viewing it through the idea of we set up this scenario, we give you specific rules, and then how do we explore those rules? How do we do that? On that side, I think it kind of just fails entirely. It does a good job of setting up the rules and like giving you a bare bones, but I felt like every time that it had the opportunity to delve in deeper / do something with it, it just decided not to. And that is to say that it is replacing it with more character work, and that's good. But by the time the movie ended, the idea of it being a sci-fi film is kind of just the getting the foot in the door. Whereas at the end of the movie, I don't think it really was even trying to do that. It was more so just focused on the character work. So, I mean, it's still well made. It's still decent. I would argue there are a couple of pacing issues, not in so much if I was bored, but it just felt like a kind of an emotional whiplash at some scenes where it felt like certain things were happening too early and other things were happening too late. I guess overall, it has its problems. I didn't come out of this feeling like it was a masterfully made film or anything like that, but it was deeper than I initially went in expecting. So kudos on that.
Yeah, I think that this is not a movie that is even really all that interested in giving you that much of an explanation as to why the sci-fi element is what it is. There is a little bit of one, but it's mostly just like a mystical thing rather than anything else. It's more about using it, and I do think it kind of sets up some simple rules, and maybe more importantly, it's how the characters then use it. And it's used in a surprising way, because, ultimately how it's used going into the third act is actually not something I was expecting, in the first half of the movie. It completely, it's because ultimately once it's set up and characters realize it's going on, it's like, okay, we're in this situation now, what are we doing with it? And the natural thing to say is, well, just never go to that park ever again, because it's just dangerous. Why would you do it? But it gives there's thematic reasons why characters do decide to go there, and there's thematic reasons as to how it's used and what it represents and the entire sort of conclusion to the story. And I think it gets to some surprisingly good moments where I think you do root for more heroic characters. You're rooting against some more villainous characters. And even that, the idea that there's someone to root against and root for is not what the movie feels like it is for the entire first half. So I kind of like how much it surprised me with that. I like how it kind of unfolded and became something else. Now, having said that, I think the character works is decent. I think there's good scenes. I think there's good performances. I do think some of the back and forth with the characters is a little. It's not even that it's poor per se. It's just that we kind of hit certain moments in this movie, and I was like, oh, I guess this is what we're doing. And then, to its credit, once it kind of jumped to this like new idea, I felt like it actually did start to do interesting things with what it had set up. It's just that I don't know if I necessarily felt the gradual build to that thing. Like, if it kind of felt like there was little leaps being taken or little things where I'm like, it's almost like there's maybe a scene deleted that maybe hinted heavier at something than what there actually is there. But, it's... I think because of that, I can't say it's like a great movie, but I do think it's a good movie, and I think it's an interesting movie with a cool concept. And to its credit, like if I heard on someone explained this movie to me and they said, oh, it's this movie where it's more of a character drama about Anne Hathaway and her problems and her alcoholism, and there's this weird kaiju quirky thing tacked onto it, I would assume that the kaiju stuff was going to look really mediocre just because it's not the focus of the movie. But to their credit, it looks up to par with any reasonable budget movie that has scenes like that. Obviously, they get away with not having that many of them because it's not the focus, but whenever they do cut to it, it looks solid. It looks fine. So, yeah, fair play.
No, yeah, I again, what you were saying with the what they eventually cut to and what we eventually get is like the driving force. I think that stuff is good, but again, it does feel so separate. It feels so different from the other stuff. And you said before, it feels like there's a sudden step. I would argue that like there's kind of a zigzag motion where we start the movie off in one place and it feels like, okay, eventually we're going like setting up the kaiju sort of stuff, whatever. And then it feels like it's starting to move there. And then all of a sudden it dips back for like one more scene, one tiny little thing. And then it just focuses entirely on the bigger character driving stuff before. And I argue that only because there's specific moments in this where Anne Hathaway does not start off as a particularly likable character. She has a lot of issues with herself. As you said, she's like an alcoholic. She's trying to get past that. She eventually tries to get past that. At the beginning, she's kind of just leaning into it. But she makes a few decisions in this movie, especially in the first half, that they feel like very flawed character decisions on paper, but the way it's playing out, it just makes her feel more manipulative, makes her feel more like she's trying to egg on a reaction more than anything else. It doesn't feel like a character that I'm supposed to be like actively rooting for. It's only once we get more of the opposite character, more of her antagonist, that I'm like, oh, okay, no, she is more relatable here because she's been forced into this position.
I think that's a little unfair because, well, I agree she's kind of unlikable up front. Like, I think that's the point. I think a lot of this movie is examining how she maybe got to that point, and then kind of the sort of the cycle of like people like that being around each other, and how that maybe influences them to be worse in certain ways. And it's almost like only seeing someone who's worse than her that kind of finally makes her not even like decide to try and sober up, but it just kind of starts to act a little bit more grown up as a result, because someone needs to. And it kind of, but I think it's notable as well that even like her like current boyfriend at the start of the movie, played by Dan Stevens, even he comes off unlikable to start, and technically he's the one on the right in that opening scene, but he is just an unlikable dick the entire time. Like the way he talks to her, his demeanor, everything about him just is unlikable.
I agree at the midpoint when he gets kind of like reintroduced. I feel like in the opening scene he's entirely within his rights. Like, I don't think that he's unlikable during that sequence. No,
technically, he is within his rights. I'm not arguing that. But he still comes off like an asshole, honestly.
Oh, yeah. He's got a British accent. Like, yeah.
There's definitely like a snootiness to his attitude that, like, it and maybe it's just good on the performance, but he gets something across despite the fact that technically he's in the right, and absolutely she has clearly been doing this over and over again, and it's clearly reached a breaking point, and that's why he's it's not a spoiler to say that he breaks up with her effectively at the start of the movie, but it gets that point across, but the way he does it, and I think it's because he's a little bit cowardly with how actually explaining himself, and he always kind of like drops the thing that he wants to say and then like conveniently needs to leave immediately so he doesn't have to actually like go through with it. And admittedly that's a bit more clear later on, but even in the opening scene there's a little bit of that. So I do think he's also unlikable. I think, and I'm not saying that he's to blame for her current status, I'm not saying that, but I do think that she's found herself with someone who's bad for her, and that has further put her down a path of destruction.
No, as the movie progresses and we start getting these layers upon layers of the characters, I agree with you. And rewatching the scene, I think I would get a lot more of that from his character. But in that intro sequence, as I'm watching it, I feel like his character is like 100% doing what's best for both of them. And like, yeah, he's leaving at the moment, but it's more so of a look, I've already packed your stuff. Like, this is my apartment. I'm giving you space to leave, like without me just pushing you out the door.
Yeah, but he comes off like a pedantic school teacher the way he stares at her, like he's better than her the entire time.
Oh yeah, no, and that's again when we get the layers and layers, absolutely.
Hence unlikable. No, but I'm saying that it's there in the opening scene. I thought he was unlikable from the very first scene of the movie.
I mean, I guess this is just a difference of like opinion. I at the beginning when Anne Hathaway comes in and she's giving her like reasons for why she's showing up late and it's all these just clear excuses and lies and whatever like that, I felt as an audience member that she was supposed to purposely be unlikable in this scenario and be like, again, this sort of manipulative sort of character who's just trying to lie to get what she wants, that I didn't view him negatively as like finally owning up and saying like, look, I've put up with a lot. I'm calling it quits here. I'm done. And he's not furious. He's not raging or anything. He's just like, I've got your stuff. I'm leaving for a while. Please leave when I get back.
Yeah, I think he can also be unlikable in that when still everything you just said about her is true.
All right. I don't know. Maybe it's because I've met an Anne Hathaway in this exact scenario before, and I'm like, yeah, you get it, buddy. You do what you got to do.
Yeah, I don't know. They both come off as unpleasant people who are very bad for each other in that opening scene.
Very bad for each other. I definitely agree with that because they are absolutely not good for each other, even in these opening sequences, because she's just taking advantage and he's just continuously letting it happen. That's the entire backstory.
Yeah. So like, but that sets up the character, and it sets up this idea that she is not even like at the point where she wants to be better. The shock of being dumped and told to get out does hit her a little bit hard, but it's not like she sort of turns over a new leaf the next morning. I need to turn things around. She just kind of keeps slumping into nothingness. And part of the arc of the movie is she meets someone who is a worse version of her in a lot of ways. Someone who is more manipulative, arguably. So. Yeah. But we'll get into all that in spoilers and stuff. So, as far as anything else goes, I think it's directed pretty reasonably well. I don't think that. Obviously, the most visually memorable stuff is the kaiju stuff, and particularly the way they'll show like someone holding a tablet in the foreground, so you can see what's happening on the news in Korea, but she's like in the background actually doing the movements, and it's like a puppet. It's like she's scratching her head, she's putting her arms up or whatever, and that stuff is visually quite interesting, and it occasionally does some nice subtle things as well. There's some nice things towards the end in particular that are a bit more. I mean, they're not super subtle, but they're a lot more nuanced in the big kaiju stuff happening, where it just kind of emphasizes certain things, or a moment of triumph, or a moment of whatever. That I think is done well. But at the same time, most of the movie is set in this small town. It is set around a bar and a house and like a playground, and it's pretty kind of intentionally like, she's not happy with her life right now, so the cinematography kind of reflects that. It's kind of like, and it's not that it makes the town look bad, but it's definitely boring from her perspective. So it's not trying to like say, "Oh, look at how great small town America is." No, she's miserable here.
Yeah, I also think that that's very intentional of why the kaiju segments are set in Seoul, where you have all these, big buildings, bright lights, very colorful sort of thing. And then when we cut back to her life here, it's drab and gray and brown, and it's very much a rural community.
Yeah. There's no people running and screaming for help.
Yeah.
Which just brings the entire city to life. So it does.
Absolutely. I will say, when it got to some of the Soul segments, I mean, I don't think it's a spoiler to say that there's multiple kaiju appearances. There's multiple things where it's like, oh, these people have shown up multiple times. At a certain point, I think business should be halted in Seoul. Like they've had stuff appear every night for a straight week, and yet everyone's still like, "Oh my god, I can't believe I was just sitting here selling my hot dogs on the corner."
I feel like it's usually the same area though. I feel like they probably have like a perimeter of like, okay, seriously, this is like always ground zero. No one's going in this. Looks, this mile radius. We're not going there.
I would agree if it weren't for the fact that when they appear again, there's again always people running away. It's like, why are you there to begin with? Stop going there.
Like, people are daredevils. They're determined, and so on and so on. Now it's an interesting. It's a weird but interesting concept that is used pretty well in the movie. The only downside is that if you're expecting it to have some kind of solid science fiction reason for why it's happening, then you're not really going to get that. You get kind of like a visual that explains it, and we won't spoil what that is yet, but it's not much to it, right?
I would even argue, you say a solid sci-fi reason. I would argue if you go into this wanting a solid sci-fi movie, like, it's used as the MacGuffin, it's used as the backdrop to tell this character story, but it's not like we're setting this in a deep sci-fi sort of setting. It's very much.
But why should that be a negative, though?
No, I'm not saying it should be, but like, if you're going into this expecting like the kaiju to be front and center, I would argue adjust your expectations.
Oh,
like,
of course,
that's not what we're doing here.
That's not what it is, but it's not like inherently a negative if that's not what it is, because it's
no.
I think the way it's using the kaiju stuff is actually quite funny and smart and creative. So, and
it works with the themes as well. Like, once we get into the deeper themes as to like why these people are awful, it absolutely works.
And the idea that like someone who, when they're on alcohol, if they're alcoholic, when they're drunk, they're a monster. Like the metaphor, the similes, they write themselves. Like it's there.
I mean, what was the? God, I can't remember which show it was. It was either Shaun of the Dead or Walking Dead, but one of the ones that was like, someone saw someone that was just drunk off their ass, and like they tried to like talk with them or whatever, and it was completely like separate languages going on, and that sparked the idea of like, oh, what if, there's this like difference of, I don't know. It was a thing where it was an inspiration to a zombie film. I remember that much, where it's like the alcohol made it so that it seemed like it was a completely different person. Oh, it wasn't alcohol. Sorry, it was Attack on Titan. I don't know why I equated that with zombies. But no, it was a similar-esque thing.
Did you think I was going to get an Attack on Titan reference?
I didn't, but that's why when you started looking so confused, I'm like, I feel like I'm off base, because you would definitely know the zombie one if I was sharing the story.
Yes.
Yeah. No, it was Attack on Titan, where the author was out drinking, or saw someone who was out drinking that night, and like tried to talk to them, and it was like, there was a similarity there, but just this difference of, there was no way I could communicate with them. They were completely on a different plane there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, performances from the leads are solid. I have no complaints.
Yeah. I was actually kind of surprised by Jason Sudeikis. Every time I see him, I always imagine him more as like just a pure like comedy actor. And he surprises me when he gives these sort of deeper, more in-depth roles for him.
Yeah, because even Ted Lasso, which is obviously a comedy, he does get his emotional moments on that. So, no, it is interesting to see that. So yeah, but I think we're ready to go into the spoilers and start talking about the movie properly. So, You have been warned. Spoilers for Colossal from this point on. So we will get into it. Jason Sudeikis' character Oscar is a complete piece of shit, and it's a sort of thing where they tease it once or twice, and the first time they tease it, it does feel like it's like, wow, he got angry really quickly there that she might have kissed this other guy that he knows might have kissed her, and then obviously from there it just kind of escalates to like threatening mass murder if she dares to leave him. The heights of manipulation here are extreme.
Yeah. That's the thing, is the top down of this movie for the back half is essentially the ins and outs of trying to leave an abusive relationship. Yeah. But like taken to 11 because of how high the stakes are with this kaiju thing.
Yeah, it basically becomes if you leave me, if you go back with your ex-boyfriend or just leave town, I will stomp around in the kaiju playground, and who knows how many people will die, and it'll be all your fault. Because one of the big turns in the middle of the movie is that it's not just her. He's also got it's not a kaiju in his case, it's a giant robot, but he also has this big avatar that appears in Seoul when he steps on that same area. And he, and that it's this thing, it's almost like one of the two things that kind of snap her into sort of taking things more seriously and becoming more grown up is one, seeing how he is when he gets drunk and how he becomes this reckless, jealous guy who has these outbursts, who she can't really talk to, and that's something that her boyfriend has said to her, is like, I don't want to talk to you when you're drunk. So there's that, but also just this idea of the responsibility and realizing that because she tripped on this playground at one point, she's probably killed at least a few hundred people. That harsh reality is kind of what wakes her up a little bit. So, I have responsibilities now because I could very easily hurt lots of people if I don't. So you've got this idea of the alcohol becoming the monster, and that being made literal with the kaiju thing. And then, of course, it all traces back to childhood, which they're both involved in, and like an incident which showed who he always was, but also is maybe the start of her like inner rage forming.
Yeah. I appreciate what they were trying to do with those flashback sequences, and I think there is some potential there, but ultimately I just don't think that it had enough going for it, where, yeah, we got glimpses of these things happening, but it always felt to me more like, I don't know, a test audience thing of just like, but how did this happen to begin with? And then they just had to fill it in.
Yeah, I didn't think we needed them. I did like the idea, though, that they were on their way to school, because the opening scene of the movie is like, a little girl in Korea seeing the kaiju appear, and we find out later that this was 30 years ago or 25 years ago, and this was with the first appearance, and it's when basically the connection was created when Gloria and Oscar were kids. They were going to school and they were carrying what do you call these things, dioramas?
Dioramas, yep.
Yeah, we don't do that in the UK, but yeah, so this American thing you guys do. And they're carrying them, and she's made like a little Korean diorama. She's got like a little flag on there, and she's got like a couple of models or whatever she's doing. I don't know. But she's carrying that, and the wind blows it into the spot that this playground will eventually appear in. Right now it's just a bit of like forest and ground or whatever. But young Oscar, as we find out in the last flashback when it finally goes there, goes in and stomps on it. So I did like the symbolism of him stomping on a model of like Korea, and then that becoming kind of literally what he's threatening in his adult life is to stomp on Korea.
Right. No, the symbolism, I think, works to a point. It's when they then go the extra mile of like the explanations that I feel it goes too far with it.
The lightning coming down and touching her head, which is
one of her character things, is that anytime she gets anxious, she scratches the top of her head. And you think it's just there so that we can see this visual representation of when the monster does it. But no, it's because that's where the lightning struck her. And I guess she just always had that spot.
Yeah, I don't know if I need the lightning moment. Like, I think just seeing him stomp on the model and just sort of seeing this is where the anger started or something to that effect would have been enough.
I'm fine with it just being like a Stephen King-esque sort of like, and the emotion was so high in that moment that this link was made, blah, blah, blah. Fine. What drove me over the limit and the point where I'm like, that was too much, is that when they're hit by lightning, they both fall down or something, and out of their bags come action figures matching their respective things of a kaiju and a robot.
I think his robot's okay. I think her kaiju's like really weirdly specific, because I'm like,
Yes.
what 10-year-old girl's walking around with a kaiju, or it wouldn't be a kaiju technically, but just a monster action figure.
Not even that. Like, you're telling me with, like, we see how widespread over the internet this is. Everyone is talking about this kaiju attacking. If there were a doll made of it in the 90s, you're telling me that someone would have been like, hey, doesn't that look like this very specific toy from Toho that came out in 1990, whatever? Like, you're telling me nobody would have noticed that?
You know what? You're right, but I don't think it matters, and I don't think they cared about it, right? I don't think they cared about the technical explanations. This was just like a sort of spiritual beginnings of it, and then what's really important is how they use it for the actual themes in the story.
And that's kind of where I appreciate how simple the rules are in the first half. I appreciate how it's like, okay, this playground maps to Seoul. If you step on the mulch, you appear there during this specific minute of every morning. Super simple, very easy to do. As we get into the back half and they start adding on more things and just doing different things with that, the lightning being one of them, how she ends up winning in the end being the other one, I feel like the rules were not explained. It kind of just feels like ass pulls every time.
I don't know if I agree with this. So the lightning thing is not a rule. That's just the flashback explanation. That's irrelevant to how the rules are being used. I think the final, like, how she's going to one-up him, I actually think that's fine. I think that makes complete sense to me.
Oh, okay. Nah, I disagree.
What?
I mean, if we're just going to get into it now. So the idea of it is that Seoul, the city of Seoul, is scaled down to represent this park. So like all the mulch in the playground, it's scaled down to that level. But then somehow in the reverse, this specific area that she just happens to wander into with no indication of where she's wandering into is the scaled down version of the whole town back home. Because she walks in from off, like, in the distance. It's not like she just appears in the park. She comes in from somewhere else. And there's no indication to say that this area is specifically where she needs to be walking into, except that it's under where he started, which shouldn't make a difference, because if she came in on the other side of the park, it would have hadn't been over on the other side of Seoul. So I felt like that entire bit at the end where she just knew exactly where to show up in order to be able to walk right to where the park is just a complete ass pull.
Okay, first of all, to explain what's actually happening here, because you skipped over that part.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, we jumped to the end.
I didn't explain. Just the basics, though, is that she travels to Seoul. The idea being that if she's there on the other side of this, two-sided connection, is that her kaiju might appear in the park where evil Jason Sudeikis is.
In concept, I agree. It makes sense. It's just in the small detail execution.
Yeah, I didn't think about any of these small details. I did not give a shit. Everything you just said there about this direction and this idea that it's like the whole of like the city's scaled down to this like area, like this like outline. I'm like, I never got that the whole city was scaled down to there. I just kind of got it was this one specific area in the city, because it felt like the kaiju always appeared in that same sort of area.
I mean, from my point of view, the idea of it is that the kaiju, at one point they have a message, they have a thing that they write in the dirt, and that was obviously scaled up from normal human size to kaiju sized. So it must be bigger. There must be a scale aspect to it, and I figured it was the size of the city going up bigger.
No, I'd be far too... No. Okay, right. Obviously there's a scale aspect here, right? Because person to kaiju is already bigger, but... When they take a step, right? If that was the entire city in this little area they're walking in, they'd be stepping to like several streets away. That was not happening. They were only stepping like down like a building's distance or whatever.
Okay, fine. It's a building's distance, so be it. But that's still a scaled up model from 5 feet to 50 feet. That's still times 10 the size of it. I'm saying she got to Seoul.
I hate this conversation. I don't care about any of this.
All right, fine, fair enough.
This matters.
I went into this and I was impressed at the beginning with the rules that they laid down, because it is high concept. It's a very high concept thing they're doing here. And they laid it down and said, okay, this particular time of day, this particular area. And I think the best part about it is they made it believable that this would happen multiple times in a row in order to trigger the understanding of the pattern. I like the fact that they made that actually work here instead of making it some contrived thing of like, oh, this is just like the fastest way home or something like that. I'm good with all that. It's only once we get to the back half that it feels like those initial rules are kind of not enough to carry everything that they want to do, and you're left to make these leaps, like we said, of the opposite cities are linked to each other. So of course, like, does that mean that I'm being hyperbolic here, so don't think I'm serious about this, but does that mean on that day in Seoul, however many years ago, someone trampled on an American diorama and there was an emotional thing to make the link in reverse? Like, I don't think that the movie did enough to establish the rest of the rules moving down. And to be fair, it didn't seem like it had an interest in doing that. We already said it's a character drama first. It wants to do that stuff. And I'm all good with that. But when it pulls these things out in the end and makes it so that's how the movie concludes, I needed a little bit more.
Why do you think someone had to establish a connection on the Korean side?
I just said I was being hyperbolic.
Okay,
I didn't actually think that was the case.
Okay, because I just, look, I was not thinking as logical about every little detail going into this finale. I thought the simple logic of going to the other side of the connection would mean that it would work in reverse. That's it. And I think on that value, you can say there's a little bit of a contrivance of the perfect walk in from behind the tree and all the rest of it. There's definitely some like, oh, her hand happened to, reach down at the exact right spot. How would she know that's exactly where to reach to? I think that's a fair statement to make. But ultimately, in the rush of the moment and what it means for the character in the moment, I think everything's working quite well. I don't think, and this is the thing, you're saying all these things, but by this point in the movie, you knew fine well this movie had no interest in going any deeper on the scientific side of this, right? You knew that by this point.
I did know that. However, that's not giving the movie a free pass to then continue down the sci-fi elements of it. Like, there's nothing to say this movie couldn't have ended with a free-for-all brawl with both of them being in the same spot. Like, yes, that's not how we went, but like, the fact that they wanted to establish more of the sci-fi elements without establishing more of the rules.
No, it's not about establishing more sci-fi elements. It's about her being bigger. It's about her feeling huge because she overcomes. That's why the final shot of her standing in Seoul, right? It's not the last shot of the movie, but the final scene after she throws him away, right? She picks him up and she throws him away, which looks hilarious in Korea because this giant robot gets lifted into the sky and just goes flying, right? But and back in the park, like Sudeikis goes flying and presumably dies. Yes. She just killed a man intentionally, but he had it coming, so whatever, right?
I love the cut back to that one guy from Whiplash, and like, he clearly knows what just happened, and he just gives like a grin, like you just killed that guy. Yeah,
he knows exactly what she just did, and apparently he's been living in fear with this asshole for some time, so he's quite pleased. But there's this shot. It's a really simple shot where the camera is on her face and it starts going down but tilts up, and it makes her look taller as it goes down, making literal what's just happened. She herself feels 50 foot tall because she's just overcome the abuser and is standing tall. It's all about the symbolism. It's not about the science fiction rules. Right? And I get that we're on a sci-fi show, but that's not what this movie is. Just because we talk about a movie on this show does not mean it has to be a hard sci-fi movie every time, David.
Oh my God. Okay. Just to comment on what you're saying. Okay. Yes, Pete, I actually do have the ability to understand symbolism. I think we've talked about it once or twice on this show. To add to that, there is a sequence where in the middle, she is trying to do just like a hand-to-hand fist fight in person with him. They do the shot where it moves from high down to low as she like punches him, as she hits him the first time. And then as he gets the upper hand, they switch it. They go from low to high on her while continuing to give the low angle shot for him. Again, keeping that sort of size aspect. I get the point. I understand what you're saying. And for the ending, with her suddenly, being able to feel big and having control of the situation, I get that as well. However, in any movie that has rules to the way that their system works for whatever science or magic or whatever else there is, you can't just throw it all away and say it's okay because the symbolism works.
Well, what's it thrown away, though? Explain. You've not actually. You know what? You've not said this once. What is it actually thrown away here at the end?
The entire bit about it being okay. This playground makes the kaiju over in Seoul. That was all set up, explained 100%. Tacking on the extra of saying it works in reverse is the sci-fi. I mean, I was going to say sci-fi equivalent, but it's also a sci-fi thing of I'm going to reverse the polarity. Like, you can't just say that and then expect everything to be hunky-dory if you've already set up a much more complicated system to explain everything else.
I don't know why this betrays that rule. I really don't.
It's not that it betrays the rule. It's that they establish so much with the way that the rule works in the one direction. And then they all of a sudden, without any sort of elaboration or any knowledge that it would work to begin with, say, oh yeah, and I guess it works in reverse. Like, if she had even just one sequence where like she was somehow testing it or anything at all, then I'd be like, great, that's all I needed. That's the only thing.
It sounds like what you want is that she gets to the spot, the location that's the equivalent to the park in Korea, right? And instead of getting big, she goes Honey, I Shrunk the Kids style because she's meant to be smaller here than back home.
I was actually thinking about that at the end of the movie. I was like, all right, what would happen, like physically, if both of them were to climb onto the other person's kaiju simultaneously? Because I have to imagine they just start flying up into the atmosphere at the speed of sound. Because one of them would be slightly higher than they were in the actual real world, and then the other one would be slightly higher, so they would both lift up, and they would just keep on shooting up instantaneously.
And die, of course, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. They go to Jupiter in a quarter second. No, it's look, again, we haven't even touched on most of the character stuff.
No, we haven't.
I like all that. But I do think that the sci-fi elements were not as fleshed out as they probably they were probably fleshed out as much as the director wanted them to be. But I think they should have gone a little bit further.
Like, I think it's the best scene of the movie, so I'm going to fight you on it, all right? I'm going to fight you. No,
that's fine. I'm just trying to think if I think it's the best scene of the movie.
Because the triumph of it, the visual, like, kind of like her taking the power back and like finding her own strength because she's been proactive and thought about how to get out of the situation. I think it is a great payoff to everything. So I just wasn't sitting there nitpicking like the scientific rules of this, especially since it's like there was rules before, but they weren't exactly like hard science fiction rules. They were kind of simple. It's this location, it's this time, and the fact that it happens at all is just pure magic. Let's be frank, right? The entire concept is just pure magic to begin with. So,
well, I mean, that's the equivalent of saying like Back to the Future. Like, yeah, okay, here you got to get up to 88 miles per hour. That's the rule. You got to have all this stuff. But the flux capacitor is magic.
Well, yes, but that is different though, because that's more about how all the rules work, and it's like these are rules that function as mechanics to give like plot reasons for things, to have goals and obstacles. Like there's like this is literally more just magic, because magically there's just a kaiju of you on the other side of the world, and the only explanation you get is struck by lightning. Like that's basically it. So all what you're left with is the symbolic side of science fiction, which is just what it represents, and that's what this movie wants to explore, and it's what it wants you to think about. Yeah. And because the movie had made that so clear, even like by the halfway point of this film, there was like no indication whatsoever that it was ever going to be more than that. I didn't go into the final 10 minutes expecting anything else or being surprised with, I was just into what the character stuff was at that point.
Like, part of me wants to say, okay, yes, but you keep on bringing up new points of like the movie made it so clear by like early on and all that. And I would argue it didn't, because so much of the first half is she makes a murder board. She literally has like the red string on a cork board of trying to work out exactly how this does function. Like, that is an aspect of this stuff. And she also tries to figure out, like, what's a safe place to enter? Where am I not going to be crushing people? And so she has to, like, map out exactly how it is there. Is the movie interested in doing that in the back half? No. But by the time we get to the lightning bolt, by the time we get to the point where it's like, oh, okay, this is all just essentially magic, there is nothing deeper behind it, that's not until 80 minutes into the movie. Like, we have a lot before we get to there.
I think you're conflating two things here. I don't think her doing the board and trying to figure... I mean, obviously, yeah, there's some rule elements to that in terms of, like, okay, how do I do this without hurting anyone? But that was more about her taking stock and being responsible. It was more about her actually taking something seriously and realizing there's consequences to her actions in what she does. And the fact that all of her stints in the park that caused chaos before that point were all because she was drunk, because she'd been out all night drinking, that's what that was about. It was about her actually taking stock of everything. It was there to serve as that function. So
okay.
When I bring that up and you're saying I'm adding something new to the argument, it's because I'm bringing new things up that I think, like, back my argument up.
Fair enough. One thing that I just remembered that I just want to clear with you, because I don't think this is what the movie, like, it intentionally left it out to dry, but I didn't feel the intended argument was that strong. Throughout this opening sequence, every time that she does do transformation into a kaiju, it feels like there is a passage of time where she just is passed out. And on top of that, they keep on going back to this idea that she's been agreeing to things with Jason Sudeikis. She's been telling him things or whatever, and she keeps on blacking out. I think the movie is attributing both of those to alcohol more than anything related to the kaiju stuff. But it keeps happening after the kaiju stuff. And I felt like there was a missed thing there of, like, is the kaiju thing, like, draining her energy? Is it something where, like, she's
no.
That's, again, I didn't think that was the case, but, like, I also didn't get the feeling that it was from alcohol either. It didn't feel like it fully addressed that part.
No, because she's even forgetful in the opening scene though when she's talking to her ex-boyfriend. So I think it's just a case of she's blacking out and she doesn't remember anything, and so it's because I mean I think on a first viewing you might think, oh, this kaiju only appears when she is blacked out, but then they go down the path of no, she can literally mimic the movements and it'll start doing things. Right. So clearly it's like it's stumbling in there and whatever, and she. Because she sees it do the head scratch thing, when she sees it on the news, and that's what makes her click and go, wait a minute, what time was that when I was, at the park? And starts to put two and two together, and she does a test where she goes out and she does like a quick, couple of hand movements, and then she goes home, watches the news, and is like, oh shit, that's my hand movements. Oh no. What have I done?
There's a bit in the middle where she's trying to prove it to all of her friends in this town, all the guys at the bar, and she starts doing like a dance routine. She does this whole thing of this dance, and the end of it results in the robot showing up. Like, Jason Sudeikis' character steps into the park and the robot shows up, and the only thing that they say is everyone got so, like, the news cycles were so dominated with the robot showing up that they don't actually mention the dancing. And all I could think is nobody mentioned the giant kaiju dancing for a minute and a half before the robot showed up.
Well, I don't think he was being like super literal. I think when he says no one's mentioned, I think he just meant, well, obviously they were talking about it for the 90 seconds it was happening, but the second the robot showed up, that became the headline. Now it's like, page 10 news as opposed to page 1. So Anyway, so to go back to the start here and talk about we talked mostly about the opening scene already anyway in the spoiler-free section, but it's the whole thing where she's even got friends waiting to come into like her boyfriend's apartment to party after he leaves for work, proving that she not only was out all night drinking and is completely inconsiderate of what's happening here, she was even using like the place after he left, so it was even worse than he thought. But he's packed her bags, he's told her to leave, and she ends up going back to her hometown, to her family home that is empty, and not just empty of her parents, but empty of any furniture or anything. It's just completely empty. And one of the running gags in the first chunk of the movie is that even though she buys an inflatable mattress so she's got some place to sleep, she keeps like passing out because she's too drunk. before she can actually inflate it. So the first time she just sort of like takes it out the box and falls asleep. Second time she actually unrolls it, gets the pump going, but then falls asleep against the wall before it actually finishes inflating. And then when she actually does finally fall asleep on it, it deflates when she's asleep and she wakes up really sore. Yeah.
I mean, I watched that sequence and I don't know. I guess, again, I was overly analytical with my viewing of this. I kept expecting that to mean something. Like the fact that she was essentially narcoleptic here and the fact that it seemed like the bed was fully inflated, but then all of a sudden it like was flat on the ground. I'm like, is this a thing where like there's some relation to her passing out and turning into a kaiju? Is there something related there? But nope, it's just a running bit.
Yeah. But the big thing though is that she runs into Oscar, played by Jason Sudeikis, after leaving her ex-boyfriend, played by Dan Stevens. His name's Tim, and of course he's terrible because everyone named Tim is terrible. But Oscar, and he seems friendly at first. He's catching up, and she seems like she's the asshole a little bit because she, brings up his dad, and he's like, "Oh no, my dad died a couple of years ago," and she's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. That must have been hard on your mum," and he's like, "No, she died long before he did. In fact, you were still living here when that happened. You went to her funeral." And I'm like, ooh, that's awkward.
Yeah. That's this is the equivalent, like, unless this is the equivalent of saying, like, oh, so when's the baby due? Like, maybe just don't assume on these things.
I'm a man. What?
Well.
Stepped into a few hot bottles of water there. Hot bottles of water? That's a weird sentence. Anyway, so he takes her back to this bar that he owns, right? He got it from his dad, and and there's this whole idea of like covering up the past because he renovated it from like it was an old country western bar, and he turned it into a more modern bar that just feels like sort of, no theme, no kind of gimmick, but there is like one section of the bar that he's got closed off, which still has all the country and western stuff, and it's behind just kind of like a divider to hide it. And it's not until his friends came in with the say, "Oh no, he just ran out of money when he was doing the renovating and he couldn't finish, so he just kind of covered that half up." And it's like, okay.
No, I think that it does a good job even this early on of setting up these small little aspects of theming for Oscar, of this like wanting to cover up his past and trying to like give this specific image of himself despite the fact that this is underlying beneath.
Yeah. And I'm jumping around here in terms of when we get this information, but there's like one sort of scene where he's sitting talking to her and reveals that he almost got married a few years ago, and this woman moved in with her kid with him, but then it didn't last very long, and she left. But later on, it seems a little bit more like, when we actually see his place, and it's kind of a bit of a tip, and there's like photos of like family photos of him and this woman, but her face is scratched out, and I'm like, you might be a little bit more unhinged than, and admittedly, by this point in the movie, he's also done some stuff that makes us think that he might be actually kind of a bad guy.
Oh, yeah. No, Jesus, everything about his character in this back half, especially after we get to his apartment, I'm like, oh, I know you. I've met you. I know exactly what type of person you are. And this is deeply uncomfortable.
Yeah, and you can also kind of see in retrospect, like how like he's been so nice to Gloria up front, where after the first time she blacks out, he shows up the next day with like a TV. Now, for 2016, this is an old ass TV. I mean, it's big, but it's like a big 4x3 TV, and it's like, okay, this has clearly been sitting in an attic somewhere for 10 years. But
I think later on they say that all this stuff came from his like uncle's house or something.
Yeah. So it gives her a TV. Oh, you should get a couch for there. Next day he shows up with a futon to give to her, and it's this idea that he keeps kind of like imparting gifts on her, but he's being really nice about everything. He's being friendly. He's introduced her to two of his friends that always come into the bar, that being Joel and Garth, and they or whatever. And there's a little flirtation between her and Joel, he's a little bit younger, a bit more handsome than the other guys. And that's just kind of something that's there. Not much comes of it right away. But because she's made a little flirtatious comment about him being attractive, he does go in for like a little kiss at one point when they're talking about what she does for work. Or, correction, what she did do for work, because she is unemployed right now. And basically she kind of like pulls away, and it's not like that awkward. He just says sorry, and she's like, oh no, it's okay. But just as this is happening, Oscar walks out and sees kind of the aftermath of it, and just like, oh, you son of a bitch, she's just been here a day and you're like, and he starts getting really upset. And it does come out of, I think on a first viewing, this moment feels like, whoa, what's with this actor? This, like, if he's into her and he's a bit jealous, like I can understand maybe like a sad look or something, but this is like aggressive the way he's kind of yelling at him.
I mean, they play, again, like you said, on her first day and all that. It's played off in a way of, I'm trying to make her feel welcome and not like, you know, she has to be forced into sleeping with people here or anything like that. But yeah, as soon as we get later on down to the movie, it's like, no, he was absolutely staking his claim.
Yeah. And that's the thing, though. As much as that, I'm sure there's a romantic element of this where he, you know, probably wants her to just be I think the way he is as a kid with her, right? It almost just comes more from like a bullying and like a jealousy type thing, and as opposed to it necessarily being like completely sexual. Like I'm sure he does want to do that as well, but I don't really feel like it's like, you know, that's like number one on the list. It's more about controlling her first, and then the sex is something that'll be just a part of that. Yeah,
absolutely, because that's later on. As he gets drunk and is threatening to destroy Korea, he basically comes out and confronts her. Yeah,
I just a sentence when he's getting drunk and threatening. I was like, oh, who are we talking about here? The president?
Yeah.
All right, and you go.
Yeah, exactly. No, as he confronts her at one point in his drunken anger and rage, he does specifically say like, you can't stop me now. There's something important with me. Like, this isn't all about you. Now I'm the one who gets to have something for me. And over the course of this, there's also multiple conversations where he keeps on stating, and it's coming across in the beginning as admirable, but he's stating how she managed to get out of this town, how she managed to go to New York and theoretically like get a life and all that.
But now she's back. Now it's like you have to come crawling back, so now you're here with me again, kind of thing.
And, but I think that's kind of what the control aspect of it is that he sees her as someone who is like implicitly better than he is. Obviously, by the end of the movie, we get the self-hatred issues on his end, but that idea of wanting to control her is less from the idea, I think, of him actually having anything for her whatsoever, and more of, she is better than me, so if I can assert myself over her, that increases my own self-worth.
Yeah, and this, you know, comes out in darker ways where like there's that first like little incident, and it's not like a big deal on its own, but it gets a little bit weirder, right? Because she does end up going home with Joel like one night, and then the next day, like they're at the bar, they're drinking or whatever, and all of a sudden Oscar's getting a little bit weirder, right? He's getting harsher. He's like demanding she go and do something, and when Tim Blake Nelson's character Garth says, "No, I'll go and like put the projector screen away," he's like, "No, don't you do it." And she's like, oh, so you're asking me to do it? And he's like, I'm telling you to do your job. And it's like, she's clearly never knew that this had to go away. She didn't, you know, it's clearly like a moment where he's picking a fight that doesn't need to be picked, but he's already drinking. So it feels like, oh, he also has a problem. He's always drinking after work in the bar that he owns.
Yeah. But then again, every single morning after the drunkenness is worn off, there's also the love bombing phase. There's the, I'm so sorry for what I did. Here's a bunch of stuff.
But notably though, in that scene, it's not just her that's getting it though. Like when Tim Blake Nelson tries to stick up for her, Oscar's like, oh, we all know why you were in the bathroom. You were snorting stuff in there. You can snort wherever you want, but just know your place, or, you know, you're lucky we don't call the police. Like, he gets very threatening very quickly. And notably, we don't see that character Garth, I think, for the rest of the movie. That is like his exit, is like him being shouted at by Oscar like that. And it's very awkward. Now, I don't know if he has anything on Joel. Maybe Joel's just too innocent and sweet and like gets bullied easily, but it feels like he has something to hold over Garth, and obviously as the movie goes on, he then has something to hold over Gloria. It's very much his thing. It's his tactic.
Yeah, I'm not even sure. Like, for Garth, it may have been a blackmail thing, but for Joel, I honestly feel that it is just a thing of he fears this man. Like, he's afraid of what the lengths he'll go to ruin his life if he ever like steps out of line or does anything like that.
That's why I say just general bullying, and not even so much that he's even actively bullied him, but more just there's been enough of an insinuation, or he's seen enough of what he can do to other people that, yeah, he's just living in I have to be on this guy's good side.
And then that's, Anne Hathaway as a character, she is very much headstrong. She is very much able to make her own decisions, but because she revealed this secret about herself, because she revealed this stuff about the kaiju and ultimately did accidentally kill a bunch of people, he's able to use that and the fact that he can also kill all these people whenever he wants to force her to stay. And so it is essentially just another layer of blackmail, but also with that added physical threat on top of it.
Yeah, although we're not quite at the forcing her to stay yet, because, I mean, in this scene, she just kind of says, hey, maybe you should slow down, and it's like, odd hearing her say that, right? And there's been a few moments throughout the movie when he offers her a beer where she kind of stares at it a little bit, and then ultimately decides to drink it, and at least another night of drinking and so on. But here, she's like seemingly quite sober and telling him that he should slow down because he's acting like this. So it feels like, okay, this is kind of... This is after she's tripped into the park and she's felt guilty about anyone she hurt. It feels like that's kind of woken her up a little bit. And here, he like drunkenly after this kind of fight with everyone, like goes out to the car and he's like, oh, you lock up. Like, here's my keys. I'm going to go and whatever. And he's going to the park and she's like, oh no, you shouldn't go there. Like, you're drunk. You should not go there. This is a bad idea. And she basically chases like him down on foot. So she gets there, and we get to like basically a standoff where he like does step into the side of the park, and she goes in, and then as like the kaiju and the robot, she slaps him really hard. So you get to see this slap happening from the kaiju to the robot, and everyone's talking about it, and it's kind of this thing where it's like he feels humiliated for a lot of that day because he keeps seeing it on the news, and he keeps getting more and more pissed off about it. That's something that plays out. And I can't remember, does Tim show up here, or is it after they've had... No, it must be here, because she's not had the black eye yet. Yeah, it must be here. Yeah.
Yeah, so Tim, the ex-boyfriend, for whatever reason... And again, I kept thinking this was going to lead to something, but it turns out to just be more characterization for Tim. He happens to show up for business in this itty-bitty little small town of theirs, and... as she's there, she's like, oh, that sure is a coincidence. You just happen to show up here. But yeah, he's basically like, look, you had a drinking problem and you were unable to find a job. Now, as we've texted and talked briefly over the course of the movie, you have a job, but it's working as a waitress in this bar. That's not better. You haven't gotten over your problems or anything like that. And over the course of this, we basically just see how demeaning and downsizing he is to her, of saying how like she's unable to improve and she's constantly going to be at this horrible level that he's always known her at. Yeah,
she's a very flawed character, but he comes off very, very bad in this sequence. And she can tell that it's coming off bad because she tries to leave at one point and he tries to come groveling and whatnot. But it's almost like, maybe in some way this is the opposite of Oscar. Well, it's not even the opposite. I guess it's kind of the same, just in a different like a different wavelength.
The other one is blackmail and threats. He's essentially just doing advanced negging. He's just like, I'm lowering your self-esteem to the point where you don't deserve to go with anyone else. I'm the only one who will take you.
But it makes him feel more important is what I'm getting at, is that both him and Oscar have that. They both have this,
Well, that's always... Every single person who does any sort of abuse like that is just trying to make themselves feel better about themselves.
But he's like, hey, at least let me drive you to work then. And she does. So obviously we're going to get, Oscar and Tim meeting each other. So, he comes in and he's making all these comments about the bar, and then almost like Batman in the background, out pops Oscar. He's like, hey there. And it's all very awkward, and they sit down, and it feels kind of weird. I mean, there's a lot of weird details to this. He sits down with Tim, and like Anne Hathaway's sitting at the side of the table. And whenever anyone asks for anything in the bar, Oscar basically snaps his fingers and makes her go do it, as if he's like making like a power play and saying she's mine now. She works for me.
He doubles back on it. He's trying to show his control over Anne Hathaway to Tim, because at this point he's like, if you do anything, I will destroy a city. But he snaps his fingers to say, like, when someone asks for a coffee, he's like, yeah, you take care of that. But then he stops her, and it's just like, actually, let me show you the extent of my control. And he goes off on this monologue for every drama class from here on out.
And this is after the apology scene, right? Because it was after the fight, the first fight in the park, where, you know, she came over to his place after Joel showed up and said, hey, he's really apologetic and he feels really bad. You should go talk to him. And, you know, Oscar goes through the paces of being like, you know, I feel terrible. Are you okay? Did I hurt you? Like, I feel terrible. You know, I'm so ashamed. He gets a little teary-eyed. And she kind of gives, like, she's like, you know what? Like, I am guilty of doing shitty things when I'm drunk. So you know what? We're good. Like, there's certain situations where I could buy her saying that and you wouldn't feel bad about her saying it. But here, like, it doesn't feel like, it feels like someone who is just going to be who they were again, like, the next time they get a chance. And within, like, 5 minutes of the movie, we're at this bar scene where he is, like, antagonizing Tim and trying to scare him. And then...
Well, that's why I think it's because Tim is there. Like,
oh no,
it's
of course,
not even.
Yeah, of course, of course. That's the inciting thing in this moment to make him go ultra Oscar mode. Yeah, like this is what makes him go back to that.
Like if she were to show up to work alone, if Tim weren't there or anything like that, would he have gone back to old Oscar mode? Absolutely. Like, he was just saying what needed to be said to diffuse the situation.
Oh yeah, it would have been later that night probably when they're drinking again or something. It would have been a little bit later. Would have been
maybe like a few days even, maybe something like that. But he takes the appearance of Tim as a direct threat to his own control, and so he has to double down and reassert it.
He has to, you know, like, launch a nuke, and a nuke in this case is a very large firework that he sets off inside the bar, because he's like, oh, this is the most irresponsible thing I could do. And he basically just makes himself look like a crazy man. There's little fires all over the bar. They're hiding behind some barrels or something to not get hit by anything. And at the end, obviously, Tim's like, Gloria, let's get out of here. You can come back with me. This is clearly a nut house. We have to go. And Oscar just says, hey, I just did the most wild, irresponsible thing I could do. And Gloria is still going to stay here with me. And Gloria stands there, and you get in the moment, the subtext here that he's making clear to her without saying it is, because if you don't, I go back to that park. Like, you have to be here to police me, or, like, chaos and murder happens. Yeah. So, you know, it's a really powerful moment, and this is the moment where you realize, oh, Oscar's the villain of this movie. He's not just another flawed character in a sea of flawed characters. He is the villain of this movie.
Yeah, no, you were saying that the final scene is the most powerful in terms of, like, you know, it caps off everything. I think this sequence, because it is such a good performance from Sudeikis. He does such a great job of just turning from the, you know, he's a little bit, I wouldn't say menacing at the beginning, but he feels like a dick. Like, he's just purposely trying to get a rise out of Tim. He purposely is, like, trying to pick a fight or whatever. But then by the end of the scene, you see just the full evil inside of him. It's not just he's an abusive, like, kind of asshole. He is actually willing to commit mass murder in order to get this woman to stick around.
Yeah, I love the moment where he says she'll still stay with me, and then you see in the look in her face, like, why she's going to stay here, like, what the threat is here, how he's blackmailing her. I love that moment. I do think that, like, he is a little, like, I would have liked more of a curve to the overall sequence, where maybe he starts off just like he's still trying to be friendly and he's not openly trying to antagonize Tim, but it turns to that when Tim says something, or, you know, some little trigger that makes him get more asshole mode, you know?
Yeah. I mean, we basically start in the middle of that, because Tim walks in as like, oh, this bar, this is gross, whatever. And so he's already like, all right, well, I don't like you at first sight.
Yeah, I think I would just like a bit more of a turn there, a bit more of a gradual uptick to, like, complete full on dick mode. But it feels like very, very quickly he's got this idea to whip out this giant firework thingamajig and you know, let rip. So
absolutely. I mean, this entire sequence here I just absolutely love, and this is, again, just before we get the full backstory on, like, what happened that day in 1990, whatever, like, how did this all happen. And I think this is the moment that, like, the movie kind of peaks for me in terms of how much I am just overall enjoying it, because from here on, it's good. I like what we're doing with the character payoffs, but it does feel, as we said before, it gets back into that sci-fi blend, and I felt like we were so out of that by this point, where it's just being used as the big red button, that I kind of didn't need to go back to it.
I mean, I mean, I think the big red button aspect of it is what I like about it. This idea that he's literally lolling it over, right, and just being like, "Oh, I will just do," and it gets more and more intense as it goes, because she goes home that night, and he's like, Oscar's just sitting in her place. He's got in with keys that he happened to have, and is like, "Hey, you're probably thinking about, what your boyfriend said, that he said, hey, I'm leaving tomorrow at noon, and you should come with him. I'm just here to make sure you don't call him." And does it even, like, and it's almost like he's trying to imply, like, oh, that would be like a big mistake on your part. Like, I'm trying to protect you because he doesn't even try and like to color it up as anything other than it is. He just says, I'm here to make sure you don't do that. Yep. No explanation, no allusions to, oh, because that would be reckless behavior and I'm trying to protect you from yourself. No. Which would be a bullshit lie, but that's the sort of thing I'd expect an abuser in his situation to at least maybe try and say to make themselves, like, convince themselves to feel better about it. I don't know. But
I mean, honestly, I feel like it's just bouncing between, does he feel like doing the sickly sort of like, oh, I'm just looking out for you? Or does he feel like just lashing out the threat? Just saying, like, if you leave, that's what's going to happen. And I guess in this moment, he just felt like a threat would suffice.
Yeah, and at least, honestly, at least to her and him, like, she like, at least a chase where he's like, going around the house and he dives out the window to get outside and she's trying to keep him from the park. And then when they get there and she's like slapping him again, he's like, oh, you slapped me, harder last time, do it properly. Like, they end up, like, properly fighting. Like, because the first time this happened where there was a proper fight, like, not a proper fight, but like, it was more comical where, like, it was doing that thing in the foreground where they're holding the tablet up and they're like having like a stupid fight where she's biting his arm, like, in the background, and it's kind of comical. Whereas this time, no, he starts throwing punches and like hits her like 3 times with like proper hard punches, and she ends up with a black eye. And then he just sort of like intentionally stomps around in front of her as if he's crushing, buildings and soul. And he's like, hey, you can leave if you want and go be with your ex-boyfriend, but I'm going to come back here every day at this time. And I was thinking at this point, well, eventually everyone's just going to evacuate Seoul and the threat will be meaningless. It'll just be a wasteland.
You'd think so, but boy howdy, we got to keep that business district going.
It's only been a few days, come on. Like, but if he was doing this every day for like 6 months, come on now. Eventually they'd be like, you know what? We got to put a perimeter up around the danger zone and just never go in it.
I agree with you that it feels like a few days. However, they keep on cutting back to the idea of like, oh, they're fixing up that back part of the bar, which feels like it takes more than a few days. I don't have a time scale on this, but it feels like at least a couple weeks must have passed.
How much fixing up did they even do, though? It felt like they just put the divider away.
I mean, maybe, but like, I don't know. Something in it, especially with Tim showing up again much like later on, this didn't feel like it was 3 days later after they broke up or whatever. This felt like it was.
No. I'm thinking more just from when she realized like what was going on. It was only a few days.
That's fair.
But yeah, whatever. And so she's at her lowest point here. Says your dark night of the soul. But when she goes home and she sees her pin board with the evidence in the map with the string, she gets the idea when the map flips upside down. And it's obvious what she's doing. Obviously the movie kind of like plays it a little bit secretive, like, oh, where is she, where did she go? But it's like, no, she's in Seoul. She's there so that when Oscar tries his shit the next morning, she's there to counter with her kaiju being in the park where he is. And I think visually all that stuff looked good. I think it's quite a rush to see him be just powerless and realize that this has been just flipped against him completely. And he deserves it because of what he was doing. He was intentionally killing people because it made him feel better, it made him feel powerful. So he deserves to be picked up and thrown away like a toy. Yeah,
no, I really like his final moment where he gets picked up. She like, I don't even know what she was doing in the real world, but the kaiju ends up like roaring at him as he's in her hand.
Oh, I love the idea of cutting back to her and just being like,
but no, I like how he's pathetic. He's crying. He's just like, please put me down. But it almost tries to trigger in you this idea of like, is she going to take pity on this sad little man? And then he lashes out again. And then he's like, oh, put me down, you bitch. And then she's like, nope, yeet, and just throws him halfway across the country.
And the beautiful thing about that is that the giant robot will disappear and not land anywhere, crushing anything, but his body will still land and die.
Yep.
So,
yep.
I
kind of do wish in the I think it was Massachusetts where it was set, in the American side of things, every single time that they do this sequence where they show it's what is it, 8:05, 8:06, whatever time in the morning.
Yeah, it was 8:05, I think, yeah.
They show the kids walking by, all getting ready to go to the school bus. I kind of wish they would have done a cut as Anne Hathaway's kaiju was standing there, of those kids on the bus, like, oh my God, what is it doing here?
Yeah. It would have been maybe nice to see a few reactions, of other locals, like, oh shit, the kaiju's here now. Should we be concerned that it's going to keep popping up? Right. I do enjoy the comeuppance. I just hope he didn't land on anyone, like...
Yeah. It's a rural town in Massachusetts. I'm sure there's, like, quite some distance to the nearest city.
Probably. Maybe if it landed in a tree or something that even hit the ground.
Yeah.
He got impaled.
Fine. I mean, he's dead, but, like, his body's fine.
Oh, he is definitely dead. I mean, it's another thing where, is it dark that she killed someone? But I'm like, yeah, but he literally was going to commit mass murder every day for the rest of his life. So
right.
I feel like it's one of the more justifiable kills of human existence.
That's the thing. It's like, oh, okay, maybe if you were to have a character who was accidentally killing a bunch of people every day, all right, maybe we should have pity on that. Like, he didn't know about it. But this guy not only was knowingly doing it to the faceless people of Seoul, but also was particularly abusive towards this one woman in person. So, like, no matter what way you talk about it, he's an asshole.
Yeah. It's also this kind of like this idea of the destruction that you cause when you're drunk, right? The idea of the monster representing that, and like all the people you don't realize you're hurting. But that's what woke her up, is realizing she was hurting people, right? Like, there was realizing she was hurting lots of people. So that kind of woke her up to it, and he does not care, which is why she is deserving of some redemption and he is not, because he has no interest in changing that. And it's why the movie ends on that little joke where she goes into the bar in Korea and it's like, hey, barmaid, do you want me to tell you a wild story? And she's like, yeah, do you want me to get you a drink first? And she just sort of gives this look of like, and I like that because it's not like she's officially like, over being an alcoholic yet. That's not magically stopped, but she's still fighting that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Especially now that, like, she doesn't have to worry about it in this specific instance. Like, she doesn't have to worry about stopping anyone. I did, as soon as she started saying that, she's like, do you want to hear a crazy story? I'm like, if by the time you get to the midpoint of this where you say, and then I tripped and I fell and that killed a bunch of people, she's like, oh yeah, my uncle was one of those people. Like, you don't want to tell this story to people who are personally involved.
Well, that's also why you can't just tell authorities to lock up Oscar, because no one will believe that this is what's causing it. So, because there's a moment in the middle where she even considers, oh, I want to confess, and then she realizes, oh wait, no one will actually believe what I'm confessing. So
right, that's what I liked, the bit that he used the how she accidentally killed a bunch of people as emotional blackmail, but not like actual blackmail. He didn't say like, I'm going to go to the police and tell them what you did, because obviously that's an empty threat. Obviously it's like, no one's going to believe you. It's not actually going to do anything. So he instead uses his ability to do it to lord that over her. One thing, just for the sake of characterization, that we kind of glossed over is that the order of events is he realizes that he is also able to do it, that he shows up as the giant robot. The very next night, she comes up with a plan to apologize and like writes down the message in Korean that says, sorry, it'll never happen again. It was a total mistake, like that sort of thing. And she specifically keeps him away from that, saying like, no, this is a me thing. Don't worry about it. I just got to handle this myself. And then it's the very next night after that, the next morning, I guess, where he then is drunkenly stomping around and causing these problems. And it feels like this is a thing where he's like, I didn't get to have my fun with it. You got to do all these things. You got to feel big and powerful. And I'm just supposed to sit back and just say, oh no, I'm good. I'll just stick around this way.
Actually, I'm glad you brought that up, just from the perspective of glossing over the her writing the message out, because has him like go to a Korean guy that he knows that owns a store somewhere, to translate some stuff into Korean, so that she, as the monster, she makes sure that she says, hey, watch the news, make sure that all the people have ran away, so there's no one to hurt, and she kneels down and she writes out this Korean that she's had written down in front of her so she can copy it. And it just says, I'm sorry, it was a mistake. I'll never let it happen again. And I like this for a couple of reasons. I like the idea, because I had the thought, well, if she wrote it in English, someone would just translate it into Korean for the Koreans. It's not like no one's going to be able to decipher it.
Yeah.
But I like the idea of the gesture of making sure it's in Korean, because that's who she hurt. I like that part of it. And I also like this idea that immediately some guy in the bar is like, see, I knew it was a good monster the whole time. One, because it kind of harkens to Godzilla like being both a good monster and a bad monster, depending on the movie you're watching. But also because when you get to the end of the movie, I do like the idea that the robot, even to the people of Korea, is clearly the villain and the monster's clearly the hero one, trying to protect them. I like kind of some of the things that sets up by her at least making this one gesture to try and tell the people, hey, I didn't intentionally try and murder anyone. I will do my damnedest to never do it again, which is basically just, I'll never come to this park. And it's actually Oscar who, from that point on, keeps dragging them back to the park because he wants to feel big and strong and powerful and so on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's the part that I like so much about it, is that Oscar is essentially just using, like, again, the whole idea of it is that he feels small, he feels unimportant, he feels whatever. And now that he's been given this opportunity, even if it's completely anonymous, he gets that feeling. He gets the feeling of being powerful and able to take these people out. And I like the fact that at the point where she apologizes, it reinforces the idea that everyone loves her. Like, even if it's, again, anonymous, but everyone's like, oh, it's a good monster. She's great. She apologized, all this stuff there. Meanwhile, Oscar's left sitting on the sideline, not being hated on, but just not being noticed. Yeah. Again, that idea of feeling small. And he's like, it's better to have infamy than being unnoticed.
Yeah, I also like that it's like, a country like Korea that this is happening to. I mean, obviously, part of the reason why it's an Asian country is probably because kaiju, and we think of Japan usually, but in Korea is not Japan, but we think of that part of the world with kaiju. But I think it's nice from a perspective of her really caring about the fact that she's doing this to people on the other side of the planet who speak a different language, and it's not, because it would be so easy for this to just be New York, right? And have she's in the small town that's upstate or in Massachusetts or wherever, and the monster's in New York, because it would be like, oh, I'm affecting America. Like, it's really nice that there's like a little bit extra heart that she's caring about people who are so different than her somewhere else on the planet, and I like that element as well.
But I also think that it doubles down on the specific theming of your drinking and like the abusive relationships and stuff like that. They don't hurt just you. They hurt the faceless others. Like, it doesn't have to be someone specific that we know that we're able to make these associations with. They hurt people just in the broader sense of people.
Yeah, no, I think that is a good point. So, and yeah, Joel kind of just shies away, and he kind of watches the fight where, Oscar does get kind of violent with Gloria and gives her the black eye. It gets, traditionally physically abusive, and Oscar, Joel's just kind of watching on, and it's kind of like, oh, you know what, Joel, you don't seem like a bad guy, but the fact that you're not stepping in here, the fact that you're not saying anything here is making you at the very least look like a coward, if nothing else. And I think that ending, that moment where it cuts to him and he's watching the news and he's quite pleased with the outcome, tells you a lot about, why he didn't step in, and, why he's now happy that that Oscar's been taken out of the picture. So
yeah, I think one tiny little scene I would have appreciated being tacked on, like, it doesn't even need to be tacked on, but maybe just a line from her, is kind of an affirmation that she wouldn't be going back to Tim either. Because they do specifically, she does say at one point, calls him up and says like, hey, I am going with you, but like, don't ask questions. It's going to be what it is. And I felt like we left the movie with the idea that she would eventually potentially be going back there.
She never actually said she's going with him. She just said, I wanted to apologize for standing you up, but I had to go on a plane. She never actually says that she's going to do anything with Tim
I remember
afterwards.
there being a phone call where she specifically says, like,
there's a phone
hey,
call.
Tim, I am going to be there before she gets on the plane to Korea.
Oh yeah, no, that's separate though. That's after she's made her choice to go to Korea. Yeah, that phone call, because that's when Oscar's sitting right there, and she does it to defy, because that's what makes them start running towards the park.
Right.
She says that in front of him. But that was more for Oscar's benefit, I think, than it was for any dedication to Tim. The phone call she makes when she gets to Korea, she never says, oh, I'm going to still come with you. She just says, oh, I wanted to apologize because I did stand you up, but I kind of had an important plane to catch. And then that sets us up for where she is and whatnot.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, it isn't like definitely saying she's going to go back to Tim. I don't think that is the case.
Because that's the thing. I think that the movie, like, to me, I don't feel at all that she's going back with Tim at the end of this.
Right. I don't know. I guess I kind of just wanted more finality. I wanted her to be able to, like, point to Tim and say, you weren't great either. Like, instead, she kind of just let him rattle on, and then she just hung up on him in the end.
Yeah. But I mean, what she does a few times, actually. There's a scene earlier on where he Skype calls her, and she just leaves the laptop on when she lets the other guys bring the couch in, and she just leaves with them, and he's just still sitting there on the Skype call, like, who were those two guys? What's going on? Are
you coming back? Hello? And then I think the scene immediately following that, he tries calling her up while she's at the bar, and she just doesn't answer.
Yeah, and it's when she's I think holding a beer as well. So there's like an extra element of the the guilt of what she's doing kind of sinking in. So I think most of this works actually quite well, especially even talking about it. I think it works even better than I thought it did. And the only real critiques, there's a few little things, when she is a kaiju and she bends down to pick him up at the end, it's like, oh, how would she know her hand's in the right spot? I feel like, perfect, but I'm willing to roll with that to a point, just because it's cinematic and it works in the moment. But I do think there's maybe some pacing in the first half where there's maybe a bit of a cycle of, like, going to the bar, getting drunk, waking up the next day. It feels like we kind of do that a few times, and it's got a purpose, like, it's got a point. But I did kind of feel the cycle of repetition before we actually get to her realizing she's the kaiju.
I didn't, I don't, it's not the exact same, but I was in a student film once where the whole idea of it was my character was, like, locked in a room, and I was only able to, like, pass notes underneath the door to someone mysterious figure that was on the other side. But the one thing that, as an actor, I was trying so hard to, like, get into my head of, like, how do I do this, is that anytime they wanted to show time passing, they had my character fall asleep. And it was, like, awake for, like, a minute and a half and then fall asleep. And then, like, 2 minutes and then fall asleep. And I'm like, can I do anything else besides fall asleep? Because, like, it just feels unnatural. And that's kind of where I was feeling in this bit here, where she's passing out so often that I assumed it was a plot relevant feature beyond just blacking out from drunkenness with how often she was falling asleep in this first bit. It felt like it was happening so much, it had to be relevant. It ended up just being, she gets drunk a lot, but I don't know. It very much, that repetition to it felt unnatural to me.
It's just a recurring motif more than anything. So
if it were continuing into, like, the back half of the movie, or they specifically call out the idea that she isn't doing it anymore in the back half, bless you, then I would be much more okay with it. But it's kind of just, it happens and then it's swept under the rug of, okay, I guess that isn't happening anymore.
Well, I think the fact that it's not happening is showing that she isn't getting blackout drunk anymore. So there is like a reason for it. It just doesn't necessarily draw attention to it too much.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, that's kind of like part of the opening sequences. The things that I want is a little bit of attention drawn to these sorts of things, a little bit more of showing these specific things that, we don't have to be given a neon sign pointing to it, but just a little bit of awareness of these are the things that are going to be coming back into play.
I don't think I had too much of a problem with what they did or didn't explain, to be honest. I think for me, I would just maybe want to tighten up the first half a little bit, because the movie's about an hour 50. I think you could probably shave off like 10 minutes without losing anything super meaningful, like just by condensing a few things here or there into one scene or two scenes.
That's fair. We also, throughout the movie, get the interstitials of like barely even flashes of her origin story, just tiny little like singular shots of what it is. I think you could have gone a bit deeper in those flashes rather than having it all backloaded into that last one.
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't really that much to show, honestly, which I guess is... I mean, they could have just not shown us anything until they just gave us the whole scene in one go, I suppose.
Right. It's either A or B. Hold it all into the back or spread it out more evenly. But the way it was is they show, like, her walking down the street, and that's it. And then you see a thundercloud, and that's it.
Well, I think what they were going for was this idea that she's having these faint memories of, like, that day, and then it's not until the moment where she gets the full flashback where she remembers, oh, Oscar was always a dick.
Yeah. I would also probably, I mean, we just barely mentioned it, but back during that day, the day where she was struck by lightning, the kaijus did appear, or at least her kaiju did appear in Korea right then and there.
That was the opening scene that I talked about earlier, is that, you know, this little girl in Korea sees the kaiju, and there's like a couple of... Because at one point someone mentions, oh, it's, you know, it's finally came back, and there was a couple of videos of that original appearance, but it was kind of like, oh, is this a hoax? Is it a conspiracy? Because it was only a quick thing, and, you know, only a few people saw it, so it was never really confirmed. But now it's happening every day at 8:05, and there's like helicopters flying by and buildings being crushed and whatever else.
And that's one of the things that I kind of want there. As soon as they make that realization of like, this happened once before in the past, and they pick out the date for it, spend a little bit of time of like, okay, well, that was clearly me. Like, what was I doing that day? Can we try to map that out? But instead, they're just like, oh, that happened at the same time that day. That's weird. Anyway, and then they just never bring it back up.
Yeah. It's just so funny. There's one of the posters on IMDb. It might be I don't know if it's the Korean poster or the Japanese poster or what, but it's literally because part of when she's dancing, she does, you know, the hands over the eyes like that. That's what they've got her and the monster doing on the poster, and I'm like, that's presenting like a silly comedy, and this is definitely not a silly comedy. This is definitely much darker than that, actually, once it gets to the meat of what it's doing. So
actually, I think it's going to be Vietnamese or Korean one. I think it's Korea. Her standing in front of the kaiju, and you just see the bottom of the kaiju's legs. I think that's more indicative of what I would say the movie is.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think the regular theatrical poster's fine, you know, with her scratching her head and the monster behind her scratching, because it gets across this idea that they're both doing the same thing, at the very least.
Yeah, absolutely.
David, what are you rating Colossal out of 10?
I don't know. I like I said over in the Range Rundown, it's kind of a roller coaster. There's so many aspects of this that I think are very, very strong highs. There's so many things that I really do like about this movie, but there's also just so many critiques of like structure and stuff like that we spend way too much time on, but regardless, they're still there. I think if I give a score, it's going to kind of just be in the middle of both of those. It's going to kind of just be an average. So collectively, I'd say this one's about a 7. I think that's it's diplomatic. It's whatever. I'd say if I was judging it by its best moments, this would absolutely be like an 8.5 or a 9. Like, it really hits some highs here. But it just evens it out with a bunch of structural problems that I don't think are really helping the movie along the whole way through.
I mean, 7 is still good. I mean, I'm not going that much higher. I mean, I think for me, I'm probably going to say 7.5. I don't want to quite give it the 8, just because I guess like the first half structure and pacing, and maybe just lack of like a real hook, right? Like, even once she starts realizing she's the kaiju, it's not like right away where I really feel the hook. It's not until the threat of what Oscar wants to do with it where I'm like, oh, that's what this movie is, and that's where it gets really interesting on a conceptual level, and all the themes really start to come together with like the idea of abusive relationships, of someone working through their demons, and so on and so on. I think that stuff is really, really good, and it hits some great highs after that point. But it takes a long time before we start getting to the real good stuff. And it's just okay before that stuff. And it's doing some character setup, which is all relevant once we get to that later stuff. But it does make it feel like, it feels a little bit like a Netflix movie for like the first half, but then it gets really, there's actually good ideas here and there's some good moments to come here. It just takes a bit to get there. So I'm going to say 7.5, which is to say it's pretty damn good. Some moments are excellent, but I can't quite call it great overall, and that's where I'm landing. So
no, that's fair.
There we go. That is that. David's got his homework movie in just a minute, but before that, I'll tell you what's coming next week on the Atomic Cinema Experiment. And next week, we are going back to the 90s ourselves for a little film called Mind Warp. What is that, you might ask? I have no idea. I bought it on sale. It looked interesting, so we're going to watch it.
Now, almost all of the films on this are decided.
That is not true. That's like one in like every 10.
Future post-apocalyptic movie.
There you go. The last movie that falls into that description where we did it because I bought it on sale was The Boys from Brazil. That was like 7 weeks ago.
All right. It just seems so frequent.
Right. Some of them are sequels to movies we already started franchises of. Some are vote winners.
Let me ask you this. Yeah. Let me ask you, out of the films that we watched, when was the last one that you didn't own a copy of, that you did have to just stream?
This one.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, that's a vote. Barely counts.
Check and mate.
They say in a court of law, never ask a question that you don't know the answer to. That was a rookie mistake on my side.
Beautiful. Before that, it was probably a good number of weeks, actually. But still.
Right, exactly.
That's besides the point. My answer was perfect for what you asked. So,
yep.
So next week we're doing Mind Warp, something a little bit different. So check out next week for that. Of course, you can support the show on Patreon, patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. It helps keep the show coming, thanks to everyone who already does, but as part of that, you will get some bonus stuff, like the ratings rundown segment for each episode of The Ace, as well as some of the other shows we do. We also have our monthly show called Extra Reels, where me and David review some of the worst movies of all time. Sometimes we are crying, sometimes we're laughing, sometimes we're begging for the sweet release of death, but
that's most of the time.
If that sounds like fun, you can check out that via Patreon, or alternative is YouTube membership if that is more convenient for that stuff. But that is that. Like, subscribe, all that usual stuff, and so on. But before we wrap up, David's got a homework movie. Every week he goes back and watches a movie from the show before he joined. And if he was smart, he'd have went with the movie from the same director as this one, but I suspect that he maybe didn't realize that that was a thing.
Look, I turned it on, I watched the movie, I said, wow, robots fighting giant kaijus. If only there was another movie that I could have put... Oh, wait, I guess there was.
Schindler's List.
Yeah. Yep. I watched the director's cut of that too, with the robot versus kaiju scene. So yeah, no, I was gonna put on Pacific Rim, and then I said, screw that. I did Time Crimes.
Aye,
I did it.
You played that very, very coy when I brought up Time Crimes earlier.
You asked me if I did it already on the show. I did not.
Technically, you never lied. Technically, you told the truth entirely.
Yep, nope. I also got super lucky, just in terms of us recording this. It is about to leave HBO Max. It has like 2 more weeks on that. So I was like, oh, better get that done quick.
I actually just bought it recently because I'd seen it obviously before, but it just got added to the UK Apple movie store like a couple of months ago. Like it just appeared and I was like, oh, I'm going to grab that. So yeah. So Spanish language movie, time loop movie. I don't know how much of this gets into spoilers. I definitely won't spoil that much of it. Yeah, I would say it's a time loop movie. I would just say it's a time travel movie.
All right, fair enough. But no, it was weird because I saw this one hanging around. You guys did this way early on the show.
Yes.
And it was one that you guys gave great ratings to. And I'm like, well, if it has anything to do with time travel, and you guys gave great ratings to, why haven't I seen it? I love time travel movies. And so I'm watching the movie, and it's good, but I'm about like halfway through, maybe 2/3, and I feel like, okay, it's good, but I also feel like this is kind of just baby's first time travel. Like, it's showing how everything that like was confusing on the first go around, gets explained on the second go around, and I'm like, okay, why is this so highly regarded? And then the third act hit, and everything gets recontextualized, and I'm like, oh, okay, I get it now. I see why this is something special here. Yeah, no, I really enjoyed it. I think it was a fantastically made movie. It's one of those, I would argue it's up there, not in confusion, but just in skill and like how you have to think it through of primer. I think that it does a great job of kind of like really mapping things out, and things that you weren't even thinking about come back into play in a strong way than that movie.
I think it's slightly better than Primer, because I think it's a better finished movie than Primer. Primer is so rough around the edges, and it's like, pay attention and get. Whereas I think Crimes, by the end of that movie, I think you understand what it was doing, and it tells the story well in that respect.
Yeah. No, I would agree. It's definitely more polished. I mean, that's kind of up to taste of whether you want something that feels a bit more indie and rougher, or something that's a bit more polished like that. But no, it was surprising to me. I definitely got a lot of good mileage out of it. What was the other one? The one where they're all in a house and they're having a party, and then like they get thrown into some weird dimension where like it's happening over and over again to other parallel universe versions of them.
I mean, I know what it is. I feel like you just spoiled it though, so I don't want to say what the movie title is.
All right, fair enough. That one was, as we were, I genuinely didn't think that was a spoiler. I thought that was revealed early, but sorry. That one, when I was talking about it, I felt like I would have a much better go around on a second or third time. I felt like that was where I was really able to pay attention to the details and make it work.
That one holds up on repeat viewings, I will say that.
Right. This one, I definitely felt like it's going to hold up on repeat viewings, but I also felt like on the first go around, I also got it. It did a good job of drawing my attention to what was needed here.
In the review, I don't know if you listened to the review, the Ace review, but there's a moment where we were talking about something that gets revealed at a certain point, and I remember talking about, do you think if we look at this version of the scene from earlier, will we see this in the background?
Yeah.
And we actually paused the review so I could go check, and then came back to confirm if it was there, and it was. Like, there was something in the background that you could have... I never did, but you could have noticed it in that first go-round if you were paying attention.
I just imagine somebody being there in the IMDb goof section, ready to press submit. And then like, oh no, wait, this was intentional the whole time.
Joe, what lives rent-free in my head is the moment right at the start of the film. This isn't, we're completely not in spoiler territory here, but the movie starts with this, the main character is this husband character, and he's out in the back garden, and he's just sort of bird watching with his binoculars, and he just happens to, he's panning across, and he sees a woman who's got her top off, and the way that he just gets up and moves his seat to a more, a more advantageous position, and he just sort of sits down and settles down, like, this is my afternoon, sorry, I'm going to watch this woman and her big boobs. And just the body language of how he does that is so funny to me, where he's like, oh, that's my afternoon, yep.
Oh yeah, I especially in that sequence, like how he first spots her, and then the wife gets in the way, and he's just like, yeah, I wasn't sports, right? Like he's trying to just play it off. He's just like, no, I wasn't doing anything. And then as soon as you can hear her car leave in the background, he just pulls back up the binoculars again. So if I got to give it a score, I'd say I'm right up there with you. I'm gonna give this one an 8.5. I think it was very much worth the watch. I think the only thing holding it back from being more in the conversation of really great sci-fi, or not sci-fi, time travel films, is the language barrier. I think that's obvious, something that just some general audiences are going to have a problem with, but I personally loved it.
Oh, you just mean and why it's not talked about more nicely? Because I would say it is in contention for I think it's top 5 time travel movies.
Yeah. No, definitely just talked about.
So no, that's a great movie. Oh, wow, look at you doing the homework properly. Very good.
I believe you said that would be the smart thing, so...
I guess I did say that. I can't take it back.
I'm smart now.
Yeah, but I'm still clinging. I'm still playing that moment over where you get all snooty and said, oh, when was the last time you didn't own one of these movies we did? And then I was like, this one, bitch. That was good. I felt good saying that.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you get to have those moments, Pete. I'm glad I get to provide some joy into your otherwise joyless life.
Oh, it is joyless. Yes, I completely agree. I'm hanging on by a thread here. Are you kidding me? So that's the show, everyone. That's the Atomic Cinema Experiment. Thank you very much for joining us. Like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications. Let us know what you thought of the movie in the comments. All that usual stuff helps out a bunch. But that is us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We do appreciate it. Keep watching science fiction and computer ad salsa.